Big weekend for 12 former Penn State football players finding their home at the NFL level. Greg Pickel was following the draft all weekend long with great insight, reporting over at BWIillustrated.com. He and I were taking a crack at the draft this year, and we're going to talk about it today. So, Greg, how you doing? How was your long weekend of watching people get their name called on air?
Yeah, Frank, it was great. Obviously, Penn State had another successful NFL draft weekend, one of the most players picked for any school. I believe the biggest was maybe 13, if I have that number correct. I'm
13
sure you have
or 15 from Georgia. One of those two,
Yes.
13 or 15. I think it was 15.
Yes, I believe it was 13. So, obviously Penn State didn't have that many guys go, but by full and full, it was a good weekend for Penn State, a good weekend for the guys who were former players and now off to the NFL, Frank, and also a good weekend for the school to be able to boast more of those NFL draft picks. You always like having a first-round pick, but you like having any round pick, and Penn State had numerous of them this weekend.
So what was your biggest takeaway from the weekend, whether it was a Penn State takeaway or just generally watching the draft? What when you think about this weekend, comes to mind first?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing to me is that obviously we all know that this is a passing league and that wide receivers are at a premium, and so are pass rushers and guys who can stop the pass in terms of the secondary. But if you didn't know that, you certainly know it now, because you saw the run of receivers that included Jahan Dotson in round one. You saw the run of defensive players to start the NFL draft. And then you saw, obviously, Arnold Ebiketie and Quan Brisker go in on day two early in the second round. So when you put all those things together, certainly an obvious takeaway, but one that is worth repeating nonetheless, is just that more and more this is the passing leagues. When we see players move from tight end to defensive end or offensive tackle, I'm thinking of this Penn State recruiting class, for example, there's a reason for that. And it's because that's where these guys can play at the next level and make the most money. Well, I mean, it's just, it's simple economics, really. So I think you'll see more of that in the future here, guys moving positions where they could be prioritized in both college and the NFL, and that's defensive end, that's wide receiver. And then obviously you get the guys in the secondary as well.
Yeah. So you mentioned the positional players that were drafted, and I thought back to Micah Parsons and the 2020 draft, because where was he drafted? I'm trying to find that quickly, and I don't know if I have this right here. But one of the comments James Franklin made about Micah Parsons at one point was he was a steal at whatever the Cowboys got him at, like 12 to 15.
Yep.
But if you look at his draft position and you just take out the quarterbacks, he was a top 5. He was like a top 5, top 7 pick.
Correct.
Quarterbacks change the top of the draft. And to me, this year, the biggest surprise, I couldn't believe that NFL teams controlled themselves when it came to quarterbacks, like desperate teams, because that's kind of what the story of Jahan Dotson was. There were no quarterbacks taken, and there was a run on receivers, and as opposed to Parsons being pushed down a little bit in that draft because of quarterbacks, those two things, I think, pushed Jahan Dotson up a little bit in the draft. Maybe 21, 20 is where he was. His starting value, I thought, was in the first round. Going at 16, that's great for him. That's a great position for him. But those factors led to where he's drafted, because the composition of the players available is always a part of it. But this is the same NFL that took Christian Ponder in the top 15 and Jake Locker and all these terrible quarterbacks that had no NFL or college production, that had no like real solid tape, and the only guy that goes in the first round is Kenny Pickett. It was just fascinating to watch the NFL actually, for the first time ever, control themselves. And I don't know what the factors were to take Malik Willis, Sam Howell, who went really late in the draft, Matt Corral, all these guys down the board. So to me, that was the most fascinating thing. Now, I want to, before we move on, I want to make sure we get the full list of Penn State draft picks here. So these are the guys that went in the draft itself. Jahan Dotson, we already mentioned. Arnold Ebiketie going 48th overall. Brisker goes, he goes 48th overall. Brandon Smith in the 4th round, 120th overall. Jordan Stout, 130th overall. In the 6th round, Castro-Fields, 221st. 7th round, Rasheed Walker. 7th round, near the end, Jesse Luketa. So,
Frank, I got to interject for just one quick second and note that it is a yearly tradition that we have all these Penn State guys go off the board in like the last 25 picks. I mean, it is it is multiple years in a row now where we can't post stories fast enough in terms of, oh, wow, there goes Tariq Castro-Fields. Okay, there goes Rasheed Walker. All right, there goes Jesse Luketa. It was a mad dash there down the stretch, but ultimately it ended up being the exact guys we thought would get drafted, did get drafted, and the ones who, who did not go, obviously many of them found homes as undrafted free agents. But yeah, I mean, it went pretty much as expected. But yeah, it's been a couple years in a row now of those last minute picks working out in Penn State's favor.
Is there anybody on this list that you see that kind of surprises you, either high or low? We already talked about Dotson, but is there anybody on this list that you think went in a place that surprised you?
Well, so, obviously I think the easiest answer is to start with Jordan Stout, right? I'm going to take the easy way out there, T. Frank, and go with him because obviously, I think most people, I'm not going to try and butcher his name, but most people expected the San Diego State punter to be the first specialist off the board. He was not. But, Jordan Stout's versatility is really something we've talked about for a long time. He's sneakily the most underrated missing piece of this Penn State team from 2021 to 2022. And I don't think it's particularly close. You can say it's Jahan Dotson. You can say it's Rasheed Walker. You can say it's this guy or that guy. But to me, I think it's easy to forget how many times he made opponents start at their own 25 or he pinned an opponent inside its own 5 or its own 10 or its goal line. And so I think, obviously the field goals weren't always great for him, but, clearly NFL teams watched with amazement at what he was able to do during his time at Penn State. And because of that, he ends up going in the 4th round. And if you would have told me heading into the day, T. Frank, or heading into the weekend rather, that he was going to be the 4th Penn State player drafted, I don't think I would have believed you, but here we are.
Yeah. And the difference between the two, I think, between Ariza and Jordan Stout is maybe you've got the strongest leg since Ray Guy. Who knows? Like, I don't really know. But the consistency and the accuracy that Jordan Stout has clearly was the separator of his ability to pin players or pin teams inside the 10-yard line, inside the 20, versus touchbacks and kind of losing those hidden yards. So he's got one of the stronger legs and all that accuracy. And like I told you when we were having this conversation when he was drafted, I'm not surprised that a specialist goes in the 4th round, but I'm always surprised when a specialist goes in the 4th round. We've seen kickers in the 3rd. We've seen punters high before, but every time I'm like, even in fantasy football, you don't take your kicker that high. So it's just always a little bit of a shock.
I did win a fantasy league one year taking a kicker in the 2nd round. So I have done that.
Was it
before.
A bet?
No, it's a league that prioritizes. It's an older style of scoring. So, you get 6 points for just about nothing. You get 3 points for a touchdown. And I think you need 100 yards to get a point in the receiving and passing and rushing categories. But the field goal kickers get 3 for a 30-yard field goal, 4 for a 40-yard field goal, 5 for 50-yard field goal. So you can win a lot of games with a quality kicker. So I have done that before. But
Justin Tucker MVP sort of thing, where you're getting
correct.
10 points a game from your kicker. Jeez.
You nailed it. Yes. Yep. How about that for a Monday morning fact?
So which situations of these guys did you like the most of players going to organizations or positions that you liked how they fit? Because that determines a lot of what the next step is for these guys. So what did you like and what did you not like of that list?
Well, I can see Jahan Dotson getting onto the field quickly in Washington. I think obviously whenever you're going the 1st round, you're probably going to be a 1st-round pick. But you look at that roster, they have Terry McLaurin, they have some other guys, but there's no question that he's going to walk onto that team and become the possession receiver, in my opinion, become the guy that can bail out Carson Wentz, which, as Eagles fans know, he does need bailed out often as things go. So.
At least Jahan Dotson is used to that. Like, so a couple errant passes a game, he's able to go up and get them.
Yep, maybe that's part of the reason they picked him. But yeah, so I think the fit's there. Good, T. Frank, I really do. I know that there were a lot of NFL media folks who thought that Jaquan Brisker would be able to maybe start right away for the Chicago Bears, which is where he landed in round 2. And I even taken a long, hard look at their depth chart, but that seems to make sense to me. So I think that, again, usually when guys go on either day 1 or day 2, they're going somewhere where there's an obvious need. Now, that's not every single one of the guys that was picked with the first 106 picks, I guess it was. But a lot of them was that, that is the case where they need someone to come in and step up and play right away, or at least be able to compete to play right away. So I think that was important. And then, obviously if you look, where Stout landed with the Ravens, they had another tremendous draft. They have a tremendous draft, it seems like, every single year. So
Yep.
that is not a surprise by any stretch of the imagination that they were able to pull that off yet again. So, I think that was good. And then, I look down at the end of this list. I'm thrilled that Jesse Luketa got a shot, T. Frank. I mean, talk about a guy who has always been great to us. Not that matters or makes any difference, but he's always been great to talk to, always very insightful, and was willing to do whatever Penn State needed him to do, both as a linebacker and as a defensive lineman. So, I think that, just hearing his name called, I know it gets weird at the end of these drafts, right? Because if you talk to agents and you talk to players, there are times when guys would prefer to not go in round 7 because then they can pick where they go and they can go to the place that has the most advantageous option for them to make a roster as opposed to being assigned somewhere. So, it's sometimes kind of a hit or miss thing there in round 6, late in round 6 and in round 7. I'm sure guys are just, in love with the idea of hearing their name called and all that. But T. Frank, it looks like I may have dropped off here. If you can just throw a graphic up, I'll get that fixed while I talk. But
sure.
But yeah, so I think that ultimately what what you saw there in the late round was a good opportunity for these guys to find somewhere to play that was, looking for their specific position. So I think I'm back now on the YouTube side of things anyway. So, when you look at the fits, I think it can be hard to assess those late round picks. Let's be honest. The San Francisco 49ers probably draft a corner in round 5, 6, or 7 every year. The Green Bay Packers might look for a tackle in round 7 every year. We might as well just address that now. I think Rasheed Walker is the player that Penn State fans have had most of their questions about when it comes to, who should have left school, who should have come back, blah, blah, blah. Did he make a mistake? And to me, again, I put this on our Lions Den premium message board on Saturday morning, I think it was, T. Frank. But, this whole idea of, well, he made a mistake. Well, he shouldn't have left. Well, he should have come back. I think we have to remember that there's so many possible circumstances these guys could be dealing with, some of which may have nothing to do with the grade that they get. It may just be they want to move on. It may just be they need to move on, whatever. Yeah. So, it's very easy to try and frame this conversation as, oh, he went in round 7. It was a mistake. But it's much more nuanced than that as far as I'm concerned.
We talked about that on the BWI live show earlier today. So if you want to get, my thoughts about that, and of course, Dave Eckert, Nate Bauer, we discussed that particular topic, I think pretty well and in depth earlier today. So I just want to comment on a couple of those things because I think you bring up some great points. Some of those guys, I'll just give you some quick thumbnails on what I found today when I was researching the good positions that these guys, or the bad positions they fell into. Jesse Luketa, they actually talked about how intelligent he was, how great of a person he was, and his versatility. So some of those things that you mentioned, as far as do they matter, do they not matter, they helped him get drafted in the end, so that's a good thing for him. Treat Castro-Fields, cover 4 system. It's kind of an off-man zone hybrid. I think that's actually pretty good for his skill set. As a guy that runs really fast, needs to play in zone, but maybe it's more of an off zone where he's not playing in the flat and tackling as much. And then I wrote for the top players that Penn State had drafted. You can check it out at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com, in depth how they fit at their positions. So those guys you can check out BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. I thought Brisker might be the best one when it comes to his fit at the next level because it is a zone system. It's a 2-high system. He can be deployed across the field, deep, in the box, in the slot, whatever they need him to do. He can do all those things. So I think that's going to take advantage of his anticipation, his burst downhill. I think that one is great. But the one I'm going to bring up as far as what I think might be the best potential fit is the Carolina Panthers and Brandon Smith. The other guy that should have returned to Penn State, right?
I was going to say, if Rasheed Walker was the first one, we should have talked about Brandon Smith first. That's my mistake.
Yeah,
yes.
Shaking your fist at the sky sort of thing for some Penn State fans. And here's my rationale. It is a system that wants speed at the linebacker position. I mean, they mentioned freak athlete. Matt Rule was in love with the physical potential of Brandon Smith. But when I looked at the roster, and my thought was he would be a will linebacker at the next level, keep him in the same position, let him learn. Shaq Thompson is a well-established, very good will linebacker in the NFL for the Panthers. At 250 pounds, and kind of looks skinny at 250. Brandon Smith might be a Mike at the next level, and I think that might be where they project him, but they have Corey Littleton there already that they picked up a 1-year really low salary for an NFL free agent, so there's the opportunity for him to play there, and there's the opportunity for him to not play and to take his time, get used to the defense, learn the position. They mentioned how, the COVID year plus being a junior, a true junior, that was kind of part of his evaluation is he might be a little more raw. So my hope for Brandon Smith is that he gets kind of a redshirt year. Maybe he gets to do that at the NFL level, because I think if he's thrown in at Mike right away, he's going to struggle for all the reasons that we've chronicled at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. So I think there's a chance for a really good position there. And then the longer I look at the Atlanta Falcons and what they do, Arnold Ebiketie, as long as they have him going forward, and that's what I wrote about last weekend. If he's going forward after the quarterback, it's a great fit. They're attacking defense. You're not always attacking from the same position or the same angle. There's a lot of stunts, blitzes. There's a lot of simulated pressure. It is a lot up front. But that also means somebody has to drop.
Right.
And I don't want Arnold Ebiketie dropping. I don't think that that's his strength, and I don't think that's why you draft him in the second round, at the top of the second round, to be your guy that's going to drop. So... Right. But they got Dante Fowler Jr., I think, on the team, so they've got other designated pass rushers that are specialists that way. My concern is that they're gonna keep him in coverage, and I think that's a mistake. So those are my guys. Now, when it comes to who do you think, and we'll get to the UDFAs now, because this is another list of interesting players. Who do you think has the best chance to stick at their team, or what do you like out of these 4 players for Penn State? Derek Tangelo goes to the Falcons, Eric Wilson to the Saints, Drew Hartlaub, the specialist, to the Panthers, and Ellis Brooks to the Packers. What do you think of this list?
Yeah, so I always have a hard time with UDFAs, T. Frank, just because, we want to celebrate them for the fact that, they are reaching a major career milestone, and that's awesome. But as we well know, it is very, very challenging to make an NFL roster as an undrafted free agent. I mean, that happens all the time, no question. But, if you look down this list here, I think obviously the biggest thing that jumps out to me is that outside of Brooks, Wilson can play probably all 3 inside positions. Tangelo's obviously able to play either defensive tackle spot. So, I think that there's some versatility there, which is key. But to me, I think if you were forcing me to pick one guy who's still on an NFL roster by September out of this group, it could be all of them. I wouldn't be surprised. But if I have to guarantee you one, it's going to be Drew Hartlaub. I really think he'll find a home in the NFL as a special teamer. His speed is unmatched. I know you can only dress 53 guys for game day, and you don't always want to use one of those spots on only a special teamers, but if he can change a game for you, you're going to be willing to do it, and he can change a game for you. So I would say that he is the one guy I would point to, no question about it.
So that list to me is, I think if you look at the first and the fourth, those are the 2 best players on that list as far as guys that have the best skills. I also think that they're in the best position with, in the other part, and you're absolutely right, of like any of these guys or none of these guys or all of them could be on the roster, because a lot of it has to do with, do you have a numbers crunch at a different position? Do you need more of another position? So Derek Tangelo, there aren't a lot of defensive tackles on the roster for the Falcons. And because he has that versatility to play either the 1-tech or the 3-tech, especially in that particular defense, that's a decent spot. But the guy that I was surprised by that almost nailed my evaluation pre-draft was Ellis Brooks. He needed to go to a 3-down front with a strong front 7, that has a good defensive line. Kenny Clark, Devontae Wyatt Jr., the guy that they drafted in the first round. The difference is Quay Walker, they drafted with their first-round pick. So he's going to be the starter. He's going to slot in as that rookie to start. But outside of that, not a lot of linebackers for the Packers, and I think that's a great fit for him. I don't think he has to run and cover as much ground in that particular situation, and he can come off the field, because Devondre Campbell is the guy that is their 3rd down linebacker. If he's going to be in that system, special teams is the first thing, and linebackers are good for special teams because they can do a lot of things. Secondly, I think that there's enough room on that roster that he can back up both positions, the Mike and the Will, and make the team. So I think that's a good spot for him. When we go to, sorry, I'm reading through my notes here. Next thing that I was interesting that comes up all the time when we talk about this particular draft class is 8 players drafted in this draft, the most since 1996. Did that number surprise you at all?
No, that was the number I had targeted for Penn State when I did my predictions back on, I guess, Thursday of last week before the first round of the NFL draft started. I had all 8 of these guys being picked. I was nowhere close on where most of them landed, but I had the days right, T. Frank. I had Dotson day 1, Eviketti and Brisker day 2, and the rest on day 3. So I had that part right, but my individual predictions did not fare very well. I actually need to go back and check those. I know Jordan Stout's the one I missed the most on, and it wasn't even close. I think I had him in round 7, and of course he went in round 4.
Because he's a punter. Like we said before, he's a punter. You can't ever predict those things. And Rasheed Walker, like I said, I could see him going in the 5th. I could also see him not being drafted. It's just it's a crapshoot with a guy that is injured and has up and down production. So absolutely. When it comes to continue.
Oh, yeah, I was just going to say that, this was about right. I thought that there was a small outside chance they could get to 10. It was going to be very difficult. I mean, I think the only way they could have done it was I thought maybe somebody would take Hartlob in the 7th round. I could have saw that. I could have saw a Tangelo or a Wilson or a Brooks going in 7th. Because, look, when you get to that point of the draft, it's all about preference, and you might have a guy pounding a table for a guy to be picked in the 7th round, and if a couple scouts really feel strongly about it, I think they can get through to the leaders of the draft room. So you never know. I thought 8 was most likely, 9 or 10 possibly, but probably not. So this played out exactly as I envisioned.
Another thing we talked about on the BWI live show earlier today, if you can check that out on replay, by the way, here on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts, if you're listening to the podcast version, which, by the way, this is a great time to remind you, and I should have done this at the beginning, subscribe to Blue White Illustrated here on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts if you want to listen to us in the car, your daily commute to and from, anytime you want to listen to us. But if you want to check out the videos, bluewhiteillustrated.com on the internet as well, our website. Sign up for just $1. The whole package deal, the podcast, YouTube, and the website, all is $1 right now. 12 months of access. And for the other 2, it's for lifetime free. Unless, I don't know, YouTube starts charging for things.
Right.
When we
Which
get to
you never know, T. Frank, but you're not going to beat $1 for a year for us, so I can assure you that.
Certainly not. Yep. Certainly not. One thing that has consistently come up from our subscribers who talk to us on the message board is, why was this team so bad then? Why was this the last 2 seasons this team underperformed and they had so many players drafted? What's going on with this particular situation at Penn State, and why did this happen?
Well, I think that, look, ultimately what it comes down to, we if you've noticed, I've been a little bit distracted today. We adopted a 2-year-old golden retriever yesterday, and it's been a challenge to get through this show, T. Frank, but we're getting there.
What's your name, by the way? I forgot to ask.
It is Finn. So we have a boy named Finn now joining our 5-year-old Lola. And I can hear them just thundering around upstairs. I can only imagine the trouble they're getting into. But yeah, so, again, that is a really, look, we had a discussion about it on the Lions Den message board, and there were a lot of people who were rightly kind of chiding me for, the point is that my thought is that the coaching staff is what everyone wants to yell about, right? How could the coaches not have this team be better when they had 8 guys drafted? And I get it, but look at what their positions are playing.
Yep.
They're not quarterbacks, and they're not having impact defensive linemen go early, or impact offensive linemen go early, or quarterbacks go early. So you put all those things together, T. Frank, and it's great when you have 8 guys drafted, but number one, majority of them come day 3. So, again, only 262 players, I guess it is, get picked. So that's saying something, but it's not like these were, it's not like they had 9 first rounders or 9 day 1 and 2 guys or something like that. So, but look, what did we talk about for 100 hours of BWI dailies last year? It was once they had an issue at quarterback, and once they had an issue at defensive tackle when PJ Mustafer went down, they had problems. And guess what? None of the guys that are drafted out of Penn State over the last couple of years have played either one of those positions. Defensive end, obviously, has been very good. Defensive tackle, not so much. And so I think that, we talked about it at the start of the show, but it's a passing league, and they've had some receivers go early, obviously, and they've had some, some secondary guys go earlier than not. But at the end of the day, it's a passing world, and Penn State has struggled at times to consistently be able to pass well and defend the pass. And you can have all the guys drafted in the world that you want, but if you have trouble with that, then obviously that is going to hinder your ability to perform and win. And I think 11-11 speaks to that.
And by the way, last season was one of their best coverage units that they've had, not just under James Franklin, but probably this millennium. Probably the last 20 years. Like, that was the best collection of overall talent. And because they didn't have – football's a team game, but some positions, as you point out, matter more than others. And because the quarterback struggled, you can have the best pass defense in the world, but if you don't have some semblance of both, this is where you end up. And there was one other thing, and this is just a funny thing that, I already talked about it on the live show, so I'll leave it there. Another thing to go listen to the BWI live show earlier today, because we're double dipping is what we're doing. We're talking about a bunch of stuff from the draft and from the weekend, the new AD, but here we're focusing on the draft, so want to make sure that there's stuff over there for you to go check out. Last fun thing, nonsense question. How many Penn State players are first-round picks that are currently on the roster for 2023? Please look into your crystal ball and tell me who's going in the first round next year.
Good question. I would actually we'll have a story of some sort related to this over at Blue White Illustrated at some point this week. But I mean, I look at the current roster. So look, could Sean Clifford be a first round pick? Yeah. Is it going to happen? I don't think so. So let's rule him out of the draft eligible guys that will be forced to move on to the NFL next year. You have any thoughts on that, T. Frank, or should I just keep going?
Just keep going. Yeah. Because the Joe Burrow year was supposed to be last year, right?
Yeah, well, this is the Kenny Pickett year now, so got to keep all that in mind. But look, I mean, I will say about, I hate, I don't want to take pot shots at Sean Clifford. That's not right. But I will say this, that, when you look at what he was doing last year prior to the injury at Iowa, he was, the Kenny Pickett thing was not crazy to see. You can see it again. It's just the consistency and staying healthy, and the issues they have along the offensive line, are part of what is going to keep what has kept Sean Clifford from staying healthy. I mean, but look, Jair Brown to me could very well be a day one pick. I see that as a possibility. If PJ Mustipher was healthy, T. Frank, I think you're talking about a day one or two guy, but I just don't know yet how healthy he's going to be, when he's going to be ready to perform. So I think that he's one that I probably have to leave out of that conversation. And, when you look at the receivers, could somebody star and become a first round pick? Possibly, sure. But I don't know if I get the sense outside of Jair Brown that Penn State has any real first-round selection opportunities at this point in time, which is kind of the case with Dotson a year ago.
I'll take a different crack at this, of guys that I think have the physical potential to be first-round picks, but they have to put together the game.
Better way of doing it, yes.
Mitchell Tinsley, I think if he can improve some of his explosiveness, which James Franklin talked about, he's got production. He'll have production this upcoming season, so he'll have 2 years of that. If he can improve those physical traits and be a little more explosive, a little faster, I think he's good in all of those things, and he could be a first-round pick, because we saw Dotson, who did not have the size but had the speed and the route running. If you've got a guy that's got tackle-breaking ability, good deep speed, I could see, as long as the production matches up, that he could be a borderline first-round pick. And you never know, because receiver's such a deep position. Joey Porter Jr. has the physical tools to be a first-round pick. I'm going to just throw out Theo Johnson, as athletically he could be. But there has to be a lot of work, and then it's a one-year wonder sort of situation where the NFL might be a little bit leery. And if you're going to be a tight end in the first round, you've got to be special. So is he special? We've seen the physical tools, and we've seen the numbers and the testing at Penn State, but there is a long way to go for that to happen. But physically, I think he could do that. I just don't. And on the flip side, on the negative side, I don't see Adisa Isaac with the size. If Arnold Ebiketie didn't have enough size, and he's 250 pounds, and he's 6'2" with great length, and you have Adisa Isaac, who is not a zone guy. He's not a guy that drops into coverage a lot. He's a pure speed rusher at 245 pounds. Unless you're Von Miller and you have this unnatural strength about you, That's not something that you're going to be drafted at. So I think there's a couple of guys that physically have the potential, but it's about putting it all together. Another big thing happened this weekend, and that was official visits are now being set for the summer. So main thing is check out the BWI Daily Recruiting Show coming up tomorrow with Greg and with Ryan. But is there anything you want to tease that you want to talk about tomorrow, or any nuggets from this weekend that you want to share to let people know what you're talking about tomorrow on the show?
Yeah, I would just say this. We have a lot of guys to break down tomorrow, and it's names that are familiar to Penn State fans. But at the same time, like, you're going to have to do like the 550th Tony Rojas graphic, I think.
Yep.
So, we'll cover him again on Tuesday's show. But yeah, I mean, I think that obviously the main takeaway is this, T. Frank, that it is now that time of year where guys have either gone on some official visits and they're ready to set their officials, or they're just going to name a top 5 and go on their officials and then decide, or they're going to set an announcement date and not really set any other travel plans. So they maybe do that in the fall. So this is that time of year where there are going to be guys popping up with top list and with official visit dates and with unofficial visit dates and so on and so forth. So I would say it's a pretty transformative time. And the other thing I would note, T. Frank, this is not necessarily related to recruiting, but just throwing it out there. It is Monday, May 2. So the transfer portal window has closed for those who want to go in and still be eligible to play this upcoming season. And so right now it's just Cole Brevard, unless I missed one, which is possible, but I don't think I did. So
I don't think so.
Penn State, according to our David Eckert, is now at 85 scholarship players. That's with Damian Robinson in and Cole Brevard out. So their roster appears to be set at this point in time.
Well, there you go. That's I think that's a big win for Penn State that they didn't lose any significant players to have.
I'm surprised they didn't, frankly.
Me too. Yeah. I mean, especially at some of the positions we talked about with the depth and competition, and guys are remaining committed in this situation. One piece of news I'm going to break here, because I'm surrounded by all these great reporters, and technically I could be considered that sometimes, maybe, but not really. So I just wanted to put this out here. Tammy Robinson is not going on an official visit to West Virginia anymore. That is now open. So that I just saw that on Twitter before we started the show. So I wanted to say that. I wanted to get one on the board. You know, it's like 1,000 to 2 with everybody here at the BWI roster of excellent reporters, including Greg Pickel, who's here on the show. Thanks for coming on talking draft with me.
Always a pleasure, T. Frank. We'll talk soon, buddy.
Coming up tomorrow, the BWI Recruiting Show, and of course, BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. Subscribe to all of it. Links in the description of the video. We'll talk to you tomorrow.